What's up, guys? Wanted to quickly walk you through the basic wholesale transaction, which I think is amazing because if we use it correctly as real estate investors, we can obviously make a ton of money with it, which is really cool. And then two, if you do it correctly, you don't need we don't need credit. We don't take on any debt. We never have to buy the house. And in almost every state, you also do not need to be licensed, right? So it's a pretty sweet. It's a pretty sweet tool to have in your tool belt as a real estate investor. It can absolutely make up your entire business. It's principally what we do at Key Glee. But at the same time, even if it's not making up your entire business, it's something that every well-informed real estate investor should know about and know how to use. So we're going to cover some of the basics here. So just quick whiteboard. We'll do wholesale transaction. Now my handwriting's not the best, and this is not centered. We're just going to work with it, okay? We're just going to go for it. So to start, you've got a seller, right? And the seller wants to sell her house, okay? So she's looking to sell her house, and she's willing to sell it for $90,000, right? Which in some areas, like, wow, that's insanely cheap. In some areas, that's almost that could be expensive, right? And so just based on what part of the United States you're in. So we've got a seller. She wants to sell her house, right? And then we've got us, right? And so we look at this deal, or like this apparently, but so we look at this deal and we say, for that house, $90,000, that's a deal. Like, we are willing to pay, like, $90,000 works, right? So we sign a contract with the seller for $90,000, right? So now that makes us the buyer on this contract, right? And so we'll say that we're the buyer, right? We're buying the property from her for $90,000. So we sign a contract. When you sign a contract, you do what's called opening escrow, which I'll explain more in a later video. But you sign a contract, and then normally it's about for a retail or for an investment transaction like this, it's about 14 days, 10 days from when you sign that contract to when you actually close on the contract, right? You actually purchase the property. And so during that 14 days, right? Because we're not going to for a wholesale transaction, we're not actually going to end up purchasing ourselves, right? So during those 14 days, we go out and we find this guy named Ralph, right? And Ralph, he's a pretty cool guy. Let's say he's got sweet curly hair going on or something. I don't know. But yeah, so we find Ralph. And Ralph wants to buy that house, but he's willing to pay $110,000 for the house, right? So it's turning out to be a pretty good deal. So he's willing to pay $110,000. Well, then what we do is we were the buyer on the first contract, but we become a wholesaler, right? And so before we buy this property, we're going to actually sell to, I think it's Ralph, what's his name? We're going to sell to Ralph for $110,000. So we're going to sign what's called an assignment with Ralph, right? And what that does, and we're going to sign that for $110,000. And what that assignment does is it says, Ralph, you are going to take our position as the buyer on this contract with the seller, right? So no longer are we even really on this contract. We assigned our position as the buyer to Ralph. And we did it for a fee, right? He's purchasing at 110, we were purchasing at 90. So now what happens is when the property goes to close, Ralph is going to bring $110,000, right? Plus closing costs and things like that. But he's going to bring $110,000. He is going to get the house. So let's see, drop the house here. He gets the house and the deed to the house at closing, right? So he ends up with the real estate. That's what Ralph gets, right? We get so that's what Ralph gets. The seller will get $90,000, right? Just like they agreed to. So they end up with $90,000. And then we get the difference, right? Between the $90,000 and the $110,000. So we walk away with $20,000, right? And these fees vary. Sometimes they're big, but sometimes they're like $5,000, $2,000. It just varies. In this example, I just made big numbers so it's easy to see. So $20,000, and that is called an assignment. An assignment fee. right? And so, again, the numbers are not always this way, right? Sometimes you get it for 90, you sell it for 95, right? And so then you would make $5,000 as an assignment fee. But overall, one, we didn't have to purchase the property. Two, rather fast closing transaction, right? So these are investment grade or investment properties, which means they're not taking 35 days to close. You don't have to get a lender or anything along those lines. Neither does your end buyer, because he or she will be closing in cash. So quick transactions, you don't enter into any debt. There's no risk on your part, right? Like you're not purchasing this property at any point, so you don't have any risk, like the market's gonna go up or down. And everyone gets what they want, right? We're able to help the seller. The buyer is able to get a new property that generally these properties are gonna be beat up. Like, we're not getting smoking deals on beautiful properties, we're not getting smoking deals on beautiful properties, we're getting deals on properties that are beat up. Right? And they're priced accordingly. So anyhow, it ends up working great for the seller, ends up working great for the buyer, and then obviously we make a fee for the service of connecting the two. So now, that is a wholesale transaction in a nutshell. Thanks for watching the video. Hopefully this gives a little bit more clarity if you're brand new to wholesaling on what it looks like.